We had to build these facilities from nothing. It was very expensive in the beginning, and making sure that we're not only operating those facilities efficiently, but also being able to look at our revenue and our profit margins and making sure that we're sizing for the industry correctly.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields. With me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, George DeNardo, president of Ayr Wellness. George, thanks for taking the time. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I hope you guys are doing well, and thank you for having me on.
Excited to dive in. Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Excited to talk to George today. Really excited to dive into everything AYR's got going on. And I'm just going to hold down the West Coast today. You know what I mean? How are you, Brian?
Yeah, I'm excited. Before we hopped on, George and I do have some allegiances on sports teams that don't need to be named publicly, so we don't get shamed. But we are aligned on that. And just a little East Coast, West Coast battle. George, if we had to put you on the record, which side are you taking?
East Coast.
Love it. I love it. So for our listeners, unfamiliar about you, can you give a quick background and kind of how you found your way to the cannabis space?
Sure. I mean, a lot of time in what I'll just generically call telecom, oil and gas, fiber optics. And then in 2018, and it was various roles, anywhere from procurement to operations to business development. And then in 2018, I transitioned over to cannabis. I was looking for a challenge in my career. And, obviously I found the perfect challenge. And it's been challenging since 2018, but glad I'm in the industry and really trying to just develop really how we move forward as a industry and as a company.
I love it. So let's talk about the transition to president of Ayr Wellness, and then just the depths of challenges that come with taking the top seat and then how it goes from there.
So I joined Ayr from Columbia Care in November of 23. And I've been their chief operating officer, and then obviously recently elevated up to the president. When I was COO, I was really mainly back of house cultivation, our manufacturing, doing a lot of work on our brands. Really didn't touch the retail. And that's really what the president role brought on, was really the connection between both our supply chain functions and our retail. So I work hand in hand daily with our two chief revenue officers, Jamie Mendola and Julie Winter, phenomenal team members, and really looking of really breaking down the barriers between back of house and front of house.
So let's kind of go through that process, right? You're transitioning to the top seat. Is that period of time where there can never be a slow period, right? The train is still moving extremely fast. You're trying to grasp all this new information. But at the same time, if you're moving to a different role, someone then has to assume your role. So how does that transition work where both parties can be successful while the train is still moving as fast as possible?
With my time with Columbia Care, I had both retail and operation. So very familiar with the landscape. We had overlapping markets, so very familiar with the regulators, the regulatory structure. But really, I mean, look, in 2024, what we did was we really established what I'll call a standardization of a lot of our processes, and really working internally with the development of our team members, because no action should rely on just one person. It's always a team, and establishing that ability to really have both upward and downward movement on the talent and communication, and making sure that we're all aligned on the strategy was extremely important. And that's actually allowed me to really transition to more of what I'll call it, a 10,000 foot level instead of ground level with the operations. I have phenomenal leaders in place in all of my facilities, in the overall general leadership, that it allows me to dig in more on what I'll call the revenue driving facets of the business. So a huge shout out to my leaders within operations. They've done a phenomenal job of keeping that train going in the right direction that we established in 2024, that allows me to flex a little bit more in 2025 on other areas of the business.
Are there certain areas that when you took over, you wanted to kind of dive deeper in from a data standpoint? You talked about kind of aligning the front and the back of the house. Was there areas and opportunities that you had immediately envisioned, said, this is where we should start because there's opportunities here?
Yes, most definitely. I mean, look, if we look at how the development of Ayr Ayr is a little different than what I'll call some of the other operators, that we were strictly really built from acquisitions. And there's a lot of integration that's involved in that. In 2024, we did a lot of integration on our processes. Now, what I really want to step into is really the integration and looking at where we're able to gain operational efficiency, either through consolidation of facilities or looking at leases and understanding the works and the four wall analysis of every state and every operation, to make sure that we're making the right decisions to size the business for where it needs to be today. If you look at really a lot of the operators, starting in 2016, 17, it was plant as many flags as you can. And now you start seeing them peel back saying, okay, we've lost focus as a company. So it's really making sure that we're operating with zero expectations from federal, and making sure that we're creating a healthy business moving forward, not only for within our state levels, but for our employees and for our customers.
So I imagine like your time spent back of house in operations has been absolutely kind of like your secret weapon for this transition that you're making right now. So like, could you kind of expand on some of like the nuances that you picked up from the operational aspect that you're now using to drive consolidation? Because like, just because you have a big facility doesn't mean that it needs to be running at X. You have to match it for the demand of that market, right?
You do. Yeah. And look, and I have, and my operational leaders are probably tired of hearing it from me, but really, there's business it's not that hard. It's ownership, accountability, and servant leadership. All of our leaders, we're here to serve our employees and make sure that we're putting them in a position to be successful, and having clear ownership and accountability for the different facets of the business. When you have managers that report to managers, that report to managers, that report to managers, you sort of get that. It's almost like the phone game where you get a diluted message and you're not necessarily making the right decisions. So it is all about streamlining our communication, making it very clear on who owns what within the business, what they're accountable for, and making sure that we're all swimming in the same direction. You can get segregated very quickly in the cannabis industry because every state has its own regulatory body, their own regulations, their own state system. But historically, we've used that as a crutch, and we shouldn't. Yes, regulations change, but that's with any industry. If you go to CPG, you go into food, you go into pharmaceutical, every state has different regulations. It's making sure that you're thinking about it in an efficient and effective manner to make sure that you have the right communication through the company.
I love what you said about the flags, right? Because everybody knows that map where it was like, all right, we're in these 8 states, like this is where we're going. And it was growth at all costs. And now it seems like everyone's taking a peel back and going, okay, growth is not the best, most beneficial number. It is profitability, and how we get there involves with understanding what our costs are everywhere in the supply chain, right? And when we talk vertical integration, that is understanding the cost of seeds in the ground to finished product. When it talks extraction, all of those details. So are there areas that when you look through the numbers that were harder to quantify certain COGS, one versus the other, and vice versa? Was there one that was really easy that you were like, here's an opportunity for we can improve on?
Not really. When we look, we have phenomenal partners, and when I look at, again, you have operational leaders, but you also have your shared leaders, your shared organizations. And we have great leadership within the finance organization that we're able to work through all the numbers on a monthly basis. And it's just making sure that we are very familiar with our capital structure and ways that we can streamline our operations to offset. Because, let's face it, cannabis industry, it was built really, we had to build these facilities from nothing. It was very expensive in the beginning, and making sure that we're not only operating those facilities efficiently, but also being able to look at our revenue and our profit margins and making sure that we're sizing for the industry correctly. You see it in many states. People build these Taj Mahals, and if you have 1.5 million square feet of canopy in a state, that's a lot of canopy for the demographics that are in it. Now, luckily, we have new customers entering the market every day, but that was part of the 2024 build with rebranding, improving our hardware, improving our biomass, because you only have one chance of gaining that new customer. And if they're disappointed, it's very hard to get them back. So making sure that we're hitting 2025 correctly.
Yeah, one would argue it's nearly impossible, right? If someone has a bad experience, they tell 5 people, and if someone has good experience, I think they tell 2 people. It's a crazy concept like that. But
It is.
I guess for me, like it's more about like, do you ever have to go back and audit as things evolve so quickly over time, as the price of product coming? Do you ever have to do an audit internally and be like, hey, I know historically our extraction numbers are X, but have we looked into doing Y? We're utilizing new tools for X or Y. Just as new tools and technology come on, you can look to automate certain features. And that's where we've seen some companies have tried to make a big cost saver on.
Definitely. I mean, look, and that's done, I'll call it on a daily, a weekly basis. I mean, the cannabis industry, it was very difficult to what I will call get quality OEMs or, really partners outside of the industry to assist. So a lot of it is homegrown. Or where we patched equipment together. Now, over the years, technology has evolved. I mean, let's look at AI. I mean, we're utilizing AI now on taking a look at our sell-through on products, how the brands are capturing, and keeping our bud tenders aware of some of the activities that are going in the market. So we're constantly leaning into new technology. But look, it's a daily, it's a weekly, it's a monthly review of, did we hit the operational efficiency that we wanted? Did we hit the metrics that we were looking for? Do we have to take a look at our crop planning? Do we have to look at really different strains for, say, we wanted something to wash at 4%, and now we have a strain that could wash at 5%. It's a constant review of what I'll call the core fundamentals of this business, as well as the high level P&Ls.
Do you think the cannabis industry as a whole is kind of up to par with the other manufacturing industries in terms of like automation and like some of the tools that like a more established industry is like currently utilizing? Do you think that the cannabis industry is like moving its way there? Do you think it's like on par? Like where would you put the industry as a whole from like a technology automation perspective?
I would say we're probably still lagging a little, but there has been tremendous improvements over the past, I'm going to say really the past 2 years.
Do you think it's capital related? Do you think it's because of capital?
Capital, but also bringing in the right talent. I mean,
it takes smart people to run this stuff. Yeah,
it is. Bringing in people that actually look at throughput analysis and uptime of equipment. It's so when you attract some of that talent, you're bringing that knowledge from the other industries, and given the adoption of marijuana, with the consumer basis, you're starting to see more people looking to step in from an employment perspective that's bringing valuable insight from all the other industries, either being food, pharmaceutical. I mean, we've been able to attract people from pharmaceutical, we have a chef that manages our edible program. So we've been able to pull in, and I've really the past 2 years, it's been, as an industry, more promising on how many more people are willing to come into the cannabis industry and work.
Do you have like a playbook for integrating people outside the industry into the cannabis industry? It's like kind of like, baby steps. You don't want to like scare them off real quick.
Desensitizing them.
The best is, when somebody new to the industry walks into a grow and it sort of takes your breath away. But I mean, look, even from taking, people from within the industry, we have our people ops has developed a phenomenal onboarding program where we're shadowing either leaders or shadowing people within their function, and really making sure that we're integrating them into the Ayr way correctly and setting them up for success. I mean, we've found a lot of, other operators, day one, here's your trimming scissors, go to it. And there's not really a training. So to me, that's just as important as what they accomplish 3 months down the road. I have, we just hired on a new leader within our procurement organization, and she came from really the CPG, the retail industry, and, making sure that we're very clear on the expectations of 0 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 months plus, and how we're onboarding her and making sure that she's getting all the help that she needs in order to set her up for success.
So one thing I wanted to reiterate is it seems like the mindset approach that you're bringing in now is that like it's a growth mindset where it's like, if there's opportunities for us to do better, we should continue to uncover those, because it no longer is growth at all costs. It is now, how do we set ourselves up for long-term success? And that starts with dialing in our approach, really understanding our numbers, and automating or improving on every facet we can, because what we've done prior worked to some degree, but now the next phase of the company is going to involve a more meticulous, technology-focused approach. But it's a challenge, though, because like Kellen said, it's expensive. So you have a cat and mouse game. So George, how do you think about that balance of investing in technology that takes 2 or 3 months to return on investment, but understanding months 4 through 12, we could have a nice boom?
Well, and again, I mean, it's really, so you have to evaluate everything on what the business needs are, right? If I have a tool that somebody's pitching to me that increases my throughput on, say, flower packaging. However, the supply far exceeds the demand. Why am I investing in that equipment? So it's taking business 101 and applying it and really seeing what the business dictates in order for it to be successful within that geography or based on the personnel that we have.
That's
How do you guys prioritize those things, though, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, we every year we go in with a plan of what's going to define our success for that year, and you have your high level KPIs. I mean, but let's face it, some of these plans are they're living and breathing, and sometimes we have to pivot very quickly. So that's why I'm saying it's always a daily, weekly, and monthly review with the leaders of did we win the day this past week or month? And how do we win the next 30 or 60 or 90 days? And that all rolls up into our overall, how are we going to be successful over the next 1, 3, and 5 years?
It's a smart approach, right? And it's level-headed and given in the reality of just how the industry operates now, you really have to have a daily approach because there is unknowns every other week. Could have been this morning. Who even knows, right? You wake up and you're like, hey, what's today going to be like? Oh, there's a fire in the corner. Guess like my day is no longer going to be like that. And one of the elements I want to talk about is the facility consolidation. It seems like your team is going back to its root approach. So how does that decision get made? Is it based on individually those facilities, how they operate, or is it more of a macro strategy like, let's go back to what we do best?
I mean, first of all, we'll always look at the macro, and that's really how the state's performing. What's the trajectory of the state? What do we think strategically, how we want to look in a year from now or 3 years from now? And then it's really looking at each of the individual facilities and saying, okay, what capabilities are there and how are we consolidating this? So, in Nevada, and I'll give you an example. In Nevada, we had a manufacturing center out by Vegas that we closed down in the fourth quarter. All they did was really manufacturing, and some of that equipment was very transferable to another facility. And then obviously we've recently announced a closure of a grow facility. And that's primarily, it was a smaller canopy. So there wasn't a lot of biomass coming out of there, but there was a lot of automation there. So we're moving all that automation over and then making sure that we're doing it in the right manner for our employees. For our manufacturing center, identifying who we can keep on and make sure that we're stable there and then giving plenty of notice. It wasn't just like, next week we're shutting down. We gave 3 months notice so everyone could be able to look for other opportunities, either within the industry or outside the industry. And then we're also working with partners on who can take over this facility and retain the employees and keep this going. So it's making sure we're doing not only right by what I'll call the business side of it, but also the people side, making sure that we're treating our people fairly and giving them opportunities to either be successful in other facilities with us or other states or with other partners.
Those relationships are so important, right? How you handle those, because other companies who might be operating in Nevada or Massachusetts could really benefit from the additional asset kind of coming in. And what I would imagine is that this is the first of many a lot of these larger companies are going to do as they kind of strip down to their core and figure out, okay, like what do we do best? How do we double down on those areas? How do we ensure that our numbers are hitting there? And then it kind of helps solidify from a business standpoint, okay, we feel really good about this 60%. For the next 25 and 26, we'll work on these other 30%. Is that the kind of approach you're envisioning long term?
It definitely is. I mean, again, it's the one thing that I think every industry, and this isn't just cannabis, the success that we have is primarily driven by the people that work for the company. Those are our quality controls. Those are the ones that are following the our standard processes for top quality product. Making sure that, every decision that we make is good for the employees. And look, and reduction of facilities is never easy, but making sure you give them enough runway that if they go to a different partner, there's that relationship of, hey, you do work with they're a great partner. They treat their people right. They're running a great company. And that's what the reputation we're trying to build out.
Expanding on that, but your growth in other facilities, like in the Florida one. So talk to us about the thought process of, okay, we're going to double down in Florida for cultivation.
I mean, and a lot of people say double down, and I don't. I think, the way, and I'm very honest with, all of our folks, both internally and externally, is we're filling a product category that we have not been able to fulfill either from a brand perspective or a quality perspective with indoor flower. This new Ocala facility, I'm very excited about. Been working the crop plans with the team. I'm very excited about the genetics and really making sure that, that indoor flower, it's something that we've never been able to really quantify. I mean, we have a modified greenhouse that grows quality product, but there is a difference in infrastructure. What this Ocala facility does is allow us to address that indoor top quality flower, but it also goes into our derivative products of our oil. Better input, better output. So I'm very excited about Ocala.
Is that an expanded approach saying we think Florida, still bullish for most of us, is going to go adult 3? And when that does happen, we want to have the resources and the horses ready to compete as a big growth driver for us?
So again, all of my decisions are not based on any movement at a federal or expecting a politician to make the right decision for an industry. I'll use Virginia as an example. However, again, it's allowing us to step into our brands, where we have Haze, Kind, and Later Days. Right now, our grow house in Gainesville will do our Later Days type flower. And then, out of Ocala, I could get that Kind and that Haze flower out of there, which is just an indoor better quality.
Listen, it's the right approach to not bet on them to take the right approach, just given what we've seen and the chaos of that. But I guess naturally, right, it's hard to plan out strategically and estimate, okay, well, if this does happen, but we can't consider it to happen, so we have to have plan A, B, and C just in case.
So strategically, I am planning that I will get no benefit from the politicians. And let's face it, if there is movement on a federal side or within, even on a state side, Florida going AU, Pennsylvania going AU, that's all upside. I can have contingency plans for that, but I'd rather have the upside not in the strategy and plan to be the best company for who we are today and then get upside later on.
Is there any fear that you might run out of supply? You know what I mean? Like if that upside hits really big and then you just don't have the manufacturing capabilities to meet that demand, is there any fear? Or you're just like, that's a good problem, I'll deal with that?
I mean, so in Florida, there's always that fear, right? Because you sell the products that you make. The third party wholesale, like other states, is not part of the medical program. Will they make that part of the adult use program? Don't know. But to me, if I can sell everything that I grow and make, that's a win, right? I mean, you see a lot of the price compression and folks with oversupply. That's a situation we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, this is part of the musical chairs game of chaos, right? Is that all the production increased, the price comes down. Now they're we're stuck with all this extra product. And sure, rationally, we could assume Florida should have passed adult use, but it didn't. And given that framework, you have to just put your head in the ground and say, okay, we have to anticipate no changes coming forward. And if it does, and George runs out of product, that's a good product, a good problem to have. And we'll be upset about it in the future, but that's one we're looking forward to being upset about.
Well, and I was reading about it, and it was based on another interview. But I mean, Florida, when they moved to the 60% limit that we needed to surpass, it was only approved by 56%. So how are we going to get to that 60% when you only had 56% approve the 60%? So, I mean, you got to sit there and just shake your head sometimes.
You were talking before about having good quality product in. Is that based on a North Star of saying, okay, our brands, we want to hit these certain metrics because we think brands will be part of the future. And to get there, we need to start with a good quality product. Is that how that decision making works?
Well, I mean, look, and it goes with the brand structure, but I mean, I don't want to minimize the work that we put into the brands in 2024. I mean, we probably ran, I'm going to say, close to 20 devices through a number of exercises, all the way from quantifiable, all the way to qualified by, our employees. How was the taste? How was the aroma? How was the pull? And so we took a statistical measurement and we upgraded all the hardware for all of our vapes. And then we actually did a full look at our crop plan and say, okay, what have we been growing over the years? Does it meet our financial metrics? And what can we bring in to really, I mean, genetics has really evolved over the past, I'm going to call it last 3 years. And really in crop planning, making sure that keeping our menus fresh. We're having new strains, varieties, and also hitting the many different demographics within the strain selection. You have some people that like the fruity, some people that like the earthy. It really depends. And you have to make sure that you're creating a brand portfolio with enough selection that addresses the majority of the demographics.
Do you have to like pre-allocate the whole crop to different brands, and like each brand has like, say, a vape pen and an edible, and you're like, hey, this crop, these yields go to these products? Is that like a top level kind of like thing that has to happen like a year in advance?
It's not a year. I mean, it's a constant evolution. We do pheno hunts in pretty much every market, where you start with a few plants. You look at the terpene levels, the potency, how it's looking. You also run it through a wash cycle, see how it washes, an extraction cycle. And then you're really developing your crop plan to hit your brand strategy within your strain selection, but also within your product. I want to make sure I have strains that wash well and actually keep their flavors for all my rosin pens. Or if I want to run it through a resin vape, I want to make sure that I have high extraction rates. So yeah, it's we do crop planning on a monthly basis, but we have probably over 180 different genetics within our portfolio, and we're constantly adding to it, removing strains, adding strains, and making sure that we're keeping it fresh.
So how then do you keep all that organized for a COG standpoint of knowing that, like, okay, this is what our cultivation costs for these strains, and then these products went into this strain. This one was going to go here, but then we swapped here. How do you keep all your numbers clean so that when you hit the number out the door, you can feel confident that that's what it actually cost you?
So, I mean, and I will give a huge shout out to our Chief Technology Officer, Sarvesh. He has done a phenomenal job on establishing internal reporting from crop planning to our lab extraction rates, where it's a simple click of a few toggles, and we're finding that historical data over the past 2 years. So again, he has taken what I would call a complex Excel formula and put it into a simple user-friendly interface that allows us to make very quick business decisions on how to go forward.
It's so important, because just hearing you talk about the complexity of that, and that is one state, right? And there's moving pieces, people change ideas. They're like, hey, this is a better match. We're going to go here. All that has to be married together, because otherwise you're kind of flying blind, and it's really difficult to know we're hitting our margin structure with this. And without that, no idea.
And look, and it's balancing our corporate goals with our, what I'll call our financial goals, and actually implementing it. When you look at everything that goes into that, it's complex. But when you have tools that creates that integration, there's very few companies that in cannabis that have an ERP system. Being able to tie our different state systems together to give us a full readout of where we are on a daily or hourly basis took a lot of legwork by our IT team, but we're in a phenomenal position to really take advantage of that going forward.
Did your IT team build that like custom in-house, or was it like kind of piecemealed from like existing ERP solutions like SAP or something like that?
I would say 80% in-house and then 20% pieced together.
See, like, that's the insights that I think people just completely miss on, is that, like, given the framework of how the industry works and how complex all those elements are, if it's not structured in a way where the data is flowing in on a regular basis, you're not able to make those actionable decisions. And then, again, you're flying completely blind, where it's like, just grow. But maybe these strains we shouldn't be growing for extraction, and maybe these other strains we should be doubling down on for extraction because they're yielding better than the others.
That's correct. I mean, and look, and that's really when I joined in November 2023, it was really establishing a standard process, having all the tools, gathering the data, and then really boiling down our brands to our three key brands. And 2025 is all about implementation and sizing this company for who we are and maximizing both the quality and throughput with what we have in place. And we said not a lot of CapEx in 2025. It's being smarter and much more clear on the direction that we're headed in this year.
A lot of that you can feel comfortable doing because you have those numbers rooted in so that okay, if we increase X here, we can expect this percentage jump. And without those numbers, maybe you increase your throughput, but maybe you're losing money on every product sold.
Right. I mean, and look, and we've 2024, we actually went down to every single piece of equipment. How many man hours does it take to meet the S&OP? We've married, again, aligning retail and operations together, so our revenue driving functions and our supply chain, and we're all singing from the same sheet of music. We're all, on a monthly basis, understanding what do we need to provide, not only for our own stores, but really developing the relationships with all of our partners throughout our states. So making sure that we're giving them the customer service, the product, and the quality that their customers are looking for, and making sure that we're reserving that space on the shelf for our brands.
Yeah, it's really well said because it works beautifully in harmony, but it's so difficult to get everyone in the orchestra on the same page because in the front of the house, when they're selling a certain product or these budtenders are hearing, hey, this product is killing, we're loving this. What you want to do is continue that product up through the supply chain because cannabis doesn't grow overnight. You need to reinvest back into the facility and allocate, okay, maybe next year we're going to put 20% of the facility for this strain because this one's ripping through.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, a lot of people don't consider that you make a decision. Everything comes from the crop, right? You make a decision. It's 16 weeks before you see that benefit. So it's not like, okay, this week I want to do this. I want to sell this strain. That has to be thought of months beforehand. So that's why we're constantly looking at what's coming out of our garden, how our supply is, what the sell-through is at not only our store, but other partnering stores, and making sure that we're keeping pace with what our customers and our partnered customers are looking for.
And each state is kind of managed as its own silo, right? With all that information coming in because it's four walls, right?
It is. So we have phenomenal leaders in wholesale. We have phenomenal leaders in retail. They're funneling that information to our chief revenue officers, Jamie and Julie. And then we're working on a daily basis to make sure that we're supporting our folks and making the right decisions, giving them the data that they need in order to maximize efficiency.
So kind of the hierarchy allows the two of them to be really deep down into the operations, and then they can share the information with you so that strategically you all can feel like you have enough pieces of the information in order to understand what's going on.
Most definitely. And to be even more clear, so Julie, Jamie, myself, we're in our facilities all the time. So it's not just looking at a spreadsheet and saying, okay, what's going on at this facility? We're physically walking through our gardens. We're physically walking through the customer experience at our stores. And we're walking through our partner stores saying, how can we better support you? So it's being involved with all of your folks. I mean, it's very easy and you could get caught up in all the data. But I also have a saying of, sometimes, there's too much data and sometimes you just have to go in and see it. So all of us as leaders, from my facilities to the chief revenue officers, we're all hands-on and engaged with our teams to make sure, and I'll go back to the servant leadership, make sure that we're serving them correctly and giving them the right information to execute.
How do you balance your time at all the different facilities?
I don't.
That's a good answer. It's honest.
I mean, let's face it. In a couple of weeks, I'm going out to Nevada. And when we, in the beginning, we talked about where's your dedication, East Coast and West Coast. So I have facilities in Nevada and I got to get on a flight. I can get to all my East Coast facilities in a car while I'm taking all my phone calls and then spending quality time with my teams. So it's a challenge, but, luckily COVID was able to show us all that, You might not have to be there in person every day for the teams. A quick Teams call and or a Zoom call, and you have that face-to-face interaction, which I think is extremely important, not only for our personnel, but for our leaders, to make sure that we're all engaged in what are the daily obstacles you're facing today and how can we help each other to be successful and win the day.
Are there any elements that you think are underrated that your team is doing that you think most are not aware of?
So I will definitely say that IT has done a phenomenal job that, I've had views into other operators. I don't think they have the systems in place that we do, both from a retail perspective and a operational perspective. And again, I think I have two leaders. I mean, their knowledge within the industry from, Jamie Mendola and Julie Winter, their knowledge from startup to execution and their experience with that is tremendous. I don't think everyone, you've seen the migration where a lot of companies have gone externally. We want somebody from retail to show us the way. Cannabis is built a little bit different. It's a different culture. And sometimes that's not adaptable to what our customers are looking for. So having Jamie and Julie really drive that in-store experience, both in our walls as well as our partner walls, I'm not sure of any other operator that can match that.
I got to see Julie speak at the Benzinga conference in New Jersey not too long ago, and I was impressed with the direction, the strategic approach of understanding of like, here's where we think we can really attack the market, and here's where we're doubling down internally, organizationally, in order to approach that. And hat tip to you for kind of putting the team together like that.
No, I mean, again, and it's the one thing I constantly stress is the leaders that we have in this organization. I mean, when I joined Ayr, it was clearly evident of the quality leaders that we had. And really this year is all about really streamlining that and making sure that we're all talking from the same page. And I think so far it's been phenomenal.
A ton of our listeners are builders and entrepreneurs. They're looking to build into the space. Is there any areas or tools that your team is aware of from a technology or a challenge standpoint that they could hear and then maybe build that for the future?
I mean, look, and I don't want to create this as a tool, but their voice. I mean, if they're new to the industry and they're trying to build something, they need to have communications with their regulators. There's so many people that sit there and say, okay, this is just retail. I'll get my building permits, I'll build out, and then I can open after inspections. Cannabis is it's built a little bit differently. And there's timelines and meetings, and having that communication and actually understanding the full impact of what they're stepping into and the timing associated with it. I see many people that sit there and say, I'm going to be up in 3 months, and they didn't plan accordingly. And they're sitting there at month 10, probably never going to open their door. So really getting out, talking to other industry personnel and their regulators within the state that they're looking to go into is extremely important. And I can't state that anymore.
What is the most gifted book?
The most gifted book.
The book that you gift the most.
I don't really gift books. I gift time. I go to my facilities, and having that face-to-face, to me, I mean, anyone can read a leadership book, and there's so many different philosophies on it. Anyone can read an operational book, a business development book. And everyone, to me, again, it's like people, it's a ton of opinions. What's most important to the folks is knowing that you're engaged in the business and you're facing the battles that they're facing every day with them and being supportive. I mean, so the best gift, and this goes in my personal life, the best gift anyone can ever give is the gift of time, because it's extremely important.
Do you think it's more valuable to have a lunch or dinner in terms of trying to create a bond with like a new employee and gifting them that time? Like, where would you say is the most valuable place to provide that time?
Dinner. And that's primarily because lunch is usually time constrained, with having to get back to work or calls. At dinner, you can actually dedicate the time to the folks and establish, not only, I mean, again, it's not only how can we take away their obstacles, but where do they want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road? And how can we help them? I mean, my conversation with all of the folks is, I'm here to mentor and coach you and develop you to either be successful with Ayr. And if that opportunity doesn't present itself to you at Ayr, to make sure that you're successful with whoever you go to work for after. It's making sure that we're developing them as a person to be successful and because we'll benefit from it and the industry will benefit from it.
What is the most expensive lesson you've ever learned?
I am going to say this is, and this is not with Ayr. The most expensive is really hiring the right person. You lose a lot of time and money by not being overly selective and making sure that that person is a good fit for what you are strategically trying to accomplish, and making sure that you're treating them correctly once you select them, that you're onboarding them in a quality way to be successful in the future. I've had a couple bad hires and it costs. It costs you time and it costs you money.
1 year from now, we're sitting here. What has changed with Ayr?
I think we're going to be leaner. I think we're going to be stronger financially in our core markets. And I think people are going to look at us, and I think we're already seeing the tremendous growth within our brands. And I think by implementing a few key strategic directions, I think we're going to see the growth of those brands through all of our markets.
Last question. What question do you wish more people asked you?
That's a tough one because I get asked questions every minute of the day. I would say, I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, I have a very open relationship with, partners outside the industry, inside the industry, internally, externally. The one thing I will say is because this industry is so hard, there is a ton of collaboration. I'll give just one example. Metric created some issues with us in or BioTrack within Florida, and the industries came together and we all talked. How are you guys handling this? How are you working through this situation? And that collaboration really, we're very open and we ask a lot of questions of each other because that's how industries grow. Making sure that we're attacking it uniformly.
I love it. That's great advice. So, George, for our listeners, they want to get in touch, they want to learn more, and they want to buy Ayr products. Where can they find you?
So we have operations in Massachusetts, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, Nevada, Illinois, Connecticut, soon to be Virginia. We're planning our strategy there now. So, we're in multiple markets. And then hopefully, we're working on our wholesale and making sure that we're on every shelf within the state to make sure that everyone has access.
I love it. We'll link it on the show notes. Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.